I don't know if that's allowed. You're live streaming. Are you allowed to vape on live streaming?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Maybe we should have swapped shirts.
Yeah, I've got my JP Sears shirt here. Okay, now we get to mute this.
Okay.
Okay. We don't have to hear. You can hear in your headphones, right?
Test two. Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, excellent. We'll see if someone, it says one is watching, but we might be the ones only watching us right now. So let's see who joins. Kind of shared the link haphazard out there. What I could do is I could throw it on Parlor. Let's do that. Over there. I saw, no, that's not what I want. Oh, that's great. Is it working? Yeah, it is. I saw out there that there are a number of people who, like me, have a number of tabs open in their browser at the same time. And they, as people used to speak about declaring email bankruptcy, they're now speaking about declaring tab bankruptcy. So yeah, we'll see if people join us this way. And I think there we are. Okay, there's Mark. Hello, how are you? Welcome, whoever is filing in. I just went ahead and shared. If you guys want to share this link out on your social media, wherever that is, that's great. I have removed the Facebook app from my phone, so getting onto Facebook is a bit of a project for me at this point. But yeah, welcome everyone. This is Don't Let It Go again, number 2 in our new streak of doing this show. Actually, I say our. For me, I've been doing this off and on since 2011, but Benjamin is joining me in this round for the first time, and he's not sure how long he wants to
For the first time, I was there for the interview with.
Well, last week, that's what I'm saying, but this
Yeah.
is the streak, right? This is
Yeah.
so a streak of 2 now, and we'll see how we do going forward. But we're going to call this one Flattening the CronyCare Curve, because we have a piece that just came out in Real Clear Policy this week, asking how many days to flatten the CronyCare curve. And not surprisingly, it was inspired by, inspire is a terrible word to use when I talk about what I'm about to talk about, which is Joe Biden's speech in which he was bullying everybody into getting vaccinated. So you talk about inspired
he
in
did
reaction.
Bless us with the Holy Ghost of inspiration. So, no, but
It's too nice a word, right?
Well, you could say we were nudged by his speech in the new speak of the brave new healthy world, right? We were nudged into writing this piece, though I think we'd started working on the piece even before.
Well, you did.
Yeah.
Someone was a slacker, right? And didn't get until later. But then I augmented it to a crazy degree. But the inspiration was already there. And in the piece, if you've read it, we talk about the fact that we believe this push to vaccination as the single solution to this crisis now, given everything that we know, is fishy to say the least, but we suspect that it is part of this overall public-private partnership, to put it nicely, fascist, right? To put it maybe in a more philosophically precise way, but CronyCare is what we're calling it, right? Where all of this cronyism is influencing the way that our leaders are trying to push solutions to particular problems. And it's disturbing. And of course, for us, where we're just people trying to figure out how do we best conduct a risk-benefit analysis and make whatever decisions are available to us to try to deal with whatever's left of this pandemic, it's disturbing. So we talk about the various public-private partnerships that are involved in pushing this agenda today
Mhm.
and why we think it's got to be fought. So that's what
Yeah, and at least start getting a handle of these partnerships, right? Because there has been so much, oblique referencing to, this is not a free market, and we have a mixed economy, etc. But then, and this is a perspective that has become even more acute for me after being properly introduced into the ideas of Professor de Smet, even prior to the interview. This idea of pointing your finger exactly at what happens in a landscape that is increasingly partisan. So everybody has their own hero, right, in the story, or let's say their own villain in the story. No, it's so for the left, it's easy. No, it's the evil corporations, etc., etc. So I noted myself how all of a sudden, over the course of the pandemic, over the course of the Rona, all of a sudden, the left, as multiform as it may be, stopped criticizing big pharma. So, hey, so that's strange. And then the political right, of course, it has been shifting as well, because since Trump, you have these, sort of an emphasis on the protectionist right, or you can call it populist, or you can call it protectionist, but the idea of tariffs being a good thing, of not having immigration being a good thing, etc. In any event, so the right traditionally either criticizes government or more generally socialism, right? And that's a safe situation for the actual system to continue, because nobody can lay their exact finger on what is happening. And then this is personally where that opinion piece started, is the history of cronyist healthcare suggestions.
Yeah, so government involvement in, for instance, agricultural subsidies, and also getting involved in the dietary choices of Americans via the US RDA and the dietary guidelines.
Yeah, based on, falsified research. So,
sugar is not bad, but fat is bad. And how many decades did we go under that? So if you think about the effect on the health of Americans of the USRDA and the subsidies of corn, out of which, of course, corn syrup, that horrible additive, comes, cane sugar, something more natural and pure, but still not great for your metabolism, of course, soy. These subsidies, and then also the skewed guidelines that favored carbohydrates over more nutrient dense sources for people, right? And we're talking about grains and other sorts of, low fat foods and stuff that people consume a lot, that just don't have the nutrient density of your vegetables and fruits and meats. That's one of the reasons that we're vulnerable. And this is something that nobody's talking about, right? Imagine if early on in the pandemic, when it became apparent that we were dealing with something that was a supercharged respiratory virus, which is what it seems to be. It's worse than the flu, but maybe not too much worse than the flu. It may be a lot worse than the flu for people who have a severe metabolic derangement going on, but mostly it's going to be this supercharged flu for people. And imagine if our leaders, recognizing this, there was plenty of evidence going on, a lot of people were talking about this, that they said, hey, we're not going to lock you down. We want you to go out and walk in the sunshine, get your vitamin D, get your exercise. Let's start kind of cleaning up our diets. I had an interview with Rob Wolf some months ago, right? I hadn't been doing this regularly, but I did interview Rob Wolf, who talked about the fact that you could improve your metabolism, your metabolic health within a matter of weeks through targeted dietary changes. Now, if you're really obese, then no, it's not safe for you to lose weight really quickly, but it's not an issue of obesity alone. It's an issue of the health of your metabolism, and the health of your metabolism can improve very quickly, whereas it can take a while to take the weight off. But nonetheless, here we are 18 months into this, and we're seeing articles where instead of people getting healthier, they're getting sicker generally, metabolically speaking.
Yeah, well,
and in kids, I saw an article saying that the rate of increase for BMI in children over the term of the lockdown has doubled. Doubled. Right?
Also a total disregard for our psychological health, of course. And this is one of the points where Professor De Smet's perspective started. The fact that we're not just, a lump of meat has been willfully ignored.
So the lockdowns and of course all the propaganda to make people comply with the lockdowns makes them even more anxious than maybe the free-floating anxiety was that existed out there before. And that combined with the social isolation, et cetera, doesn't make it any better. The lockdowns make us more and more dependent on big tech, sometimes just for the delivery of basic needs via, say, something like Amazon, but certainly all of the platforms. Now, Zoom, of course, is not much of a content controller, although sometimes they do a bit, right? But we haven't seen them engage in censorship yet. But you've got Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, the large platforms controlling what you can see. And, they've acknowledged within the last week or so that not only do they remove content based on their community guidelines, which themselves are open to, a wide berth of interpretation, but they also have certain guidelines that they follow with respect to reducing the, kind of reach that content has on their platform. And this is based on their own judgment as to what is best. Of course, what happens to also feed their bottom line. This is another point that I alluded to in the piece. I used to write some pieces with Jeffrey Wernick, who worked with Parler, and one of the pieces talked about the fact that all of these tech platforms had a vested interest in continuing the lockdowns because their bottom line just ballooned incredibly under them. Now we're seeing there's been articles about the heads of the big tech companies selling off their shares. And what does this mean for the future and for the future of their bottom lines? It's going to be an interesting era that we're in. But we're in this turning point where you have had, at least up until now, these big tech platforms joining big agriculture, as I'll call it, because they have their interests, the lobbying interests and the crony interests in our government, supporting them through dietary guidelines and subsidies. You've got big pharma, which used to be the sort of, what do you call it? A whipping boy that used to, I don't know if you're allowed to say this anymore. Yeah, of the left, right? So the left used to criticize them. And now suddenly Pfizer, they love Pfizer. They're buying tons and tons and tons of Pfizer. Pfizer's getting the approvals first. Pfizer is getting the purchases and then the distribution throughout the world. They have these exclusive contracts, et cetera. Moderna, which is showing now to be a better product. Even New York Times is admitting that Moderna is they'll say it's a slightly better product. It
seems vastly superior.
Yeah, it seems definitely superior as far as we can tell. Again, we're all in this period of uncertainty, but Moderna seems better. Where's Moderna's FDA approval? Why isn't Moderna the one being proposed for children in particular, if it's more effective, right? So all of this, I think there's a dog back there who has escaped wherever it is.
I don't think it's just a matter of volume, but
Can you guys hear a dog back there? We'll see. Congress owns Pfizer stock, I hear.
yeah.
You had seen that article,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, it's maybe the sixth most generally owned equity.
Yeah.
So
There's, so we've got the big pharma. Of course, there's big government, and big government always has its own motives for trying to push a solution. It wants to prove that it's relevant, that somehow you could not survive any sort of hardship in the entire world without government trying to help you in some way, shape, or form. And Trump was not immune to this. Trump wanted to be given credit for the particular solution, his Operation Warp Speed, to get this out here. Of course, he's partly responsible for what's going on, but Biden's just continuing it, and he's doubling down and making it worse with the mandates. And then, of course, we have big tech, and big tech has furthered the problems of all the other three, by helping to push the particular agenda and narratives that support the crony interests that are at stake with the other three. This was going on even before the coronavirus stuff came up, right? So, for example, I hope to interview again Rob Wolf pretty soon, because if you ask this question, what can we do to flatten the CronyCare curve? He's the guy with the answers. Okay, so now I was going to lose my thought. Just a second, 1 second. What was it with Wolf? Oh, yes. Okay. So Wolf, he started his own social media network in Mighty Networks. So he calls it the Healthy Rebellion, and you have to join it, etc. And one of the reasons he had to do this was because Facebook was downgrading his content, giving it less and less reach, because it had nothing to do with coronavirus back then, just because he was providing alternative solutions that you could do to take your own health into your own hands via diet and functional medicine.
And that's where I think it's helpful to get a wider view, because one of the problems he had was that in recommending meat consumption, he came into conflict with a particular pet peeve of the climate movement, if I can call them that. So what makes this particularly interesting to me is that what we see in tunnel vision now when it comes to the pandemic, and this is last time I used that word. I'm really fed up with it.
Yeah, I know.
But this whole tunnel vision of no longer being open to debate, and of using statistics, but using them in a very biased way, so as to gain the favor of they call it science, but of course it's not the way actual science is done, because when you start countering any critical questions by saying, you're a denier. Okay, so
you must be an anti-vaxxer if you raise any questions.
Yeah. So this type of tunnel vision had been brewing already. And so here's a question that I would have to people, and I referred before to the neat division in partisanship. So there are those who criticize the corporations, and are those who criticize government. And this basically allows the actual system to fester. In this case, so if you do acknowledge or do recognize that the climatic apocalypse is a fabrication, is a product of our fears, if you do recognize that. So how difficult can it be to see the analogy with what is happening now? So personally, I'm not afraid of the lockdowns. I'm not afraid of the massive vaccinations. I'm not, so all these physical measures I can deal with. What scares me is the complete shutdown of critical thinking, as you said. So if you
right, but
ask,
I mean, I see a connection between the two, though. I see a connection between
question, I'm just wondering about this or that. Exactly, as you said, the automatic answer is you're a denier. And
they can't call you a racist anymore, right? Because it turns out that African Americans are among the largest group of people who have decided not to take the vaccine at this point in time.
Guess why?
Now you're just an anti-vaxxer. You're somebody who wants everybody to die. You're to blame for perpetuating the pandemic. So to be clear, again, and we said it in the piece.
Yeah, all the measures are your fault.
We've both been vaccinated, right? And people here are talking in the chat about, oh, there's these, fears about the long-term effects and everything else. As far as I know, and I have a friend who is, bless her soul, immersing herself in every bit of data she can get her hands on, and she's super smart, and she goes through and she reads it and she summarizes it to me, and I read some of it, and we talk all the time. I do the most that I can handle too, right? Because to be in this state of uncertainty and worry about either the vaccine or the virus back and forth, right? And then plus, what is our government going to do to us all the time? It gets to be a bit much, right? So I know, just knowing myself, I do the best that I possibly can to keep myself the most informed and make the most informed decisions at any point in time throughout this whole thing. I have this friend, like I said, who's helped me. Based on everything I can tell, no, the vaccine is not an attempt to depopulate the world. There's a really good chance that it's actually a decent effort at dealing with this virus, right? As far as we can tell, Moderna's done a better job at it than Pfizer. The poor Moderna CEO, I saw him on TV the other day trying to make excuses for the fact that the FDA hasn't approved their product and they're trying to be nice about it. And I'm thinking, the guy, who knows, all of these people are dependent on the government to even allow them to do business. And Pfizer's clearly been the winner that they've all picked, even though their product, as far as I can tell, is not nearly as good. We didn't have a choice as to which one we were given. You're offered this one. I don't know, because I had some misgivings about the Pfizer back then. And the only misgiving was that it required such a high procedural cost to keep it fresh. It has that deep freeze and it would spoil quickly. And I was concerned about that. So when they said, oh, you're going to be given Moderna, I felt a little bit better, just because the sort of administration requirements for it weren't as bad. And the logistics just seemed like they would be less likely to mess up and cause me a problem, right? So there was that. So I'm not sure if I would have taken the Pfizer. Took the Moderna. I wasn't completely sanguine about it, right? I was nervous, and I didn't know if I was going to be one of the people who react. They make you sit there for 15 minutes, and I waited that 15 minutes out going, okay, good. I think you were less nervous. Yeah.
They say something you have no influence over, you shouldn't worry about. So.
Well, we had influence of whether to go or not, right? We had to make that decision of whether to get this shot.
Sure.
Or not.
Yeah. And for me, I've nothing against it on principle. I think if I had the choice, I would have opted for J&J, because it's the technology is well tested.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, at first we
sure.
were looking to see if we could find the J&J, and we got offered the Moderna, so we went for it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think overall, that's a good decision. Moderna's booster they're coming out with, they're certainly trying to be competitive if you care about competition on a free market. Their boosters, half the dose of the, first 2 shots. And apparently it's been tinkered with so that it provides protection against 5 different strains that have come out, right? 5 different variants. So they are trying, as far as I know, no one's going to need a Moderna booster for quite some time. I went and participated in Texas Cares, which is the study that they're doing to look at both natural antibodies and vaccine-induced antibodies. And not surprisingly, perhaps, although, I wonder if I had something like COVID further back, but I am not showing any natural antibodies. And then I do show the antibodies from the Moderna. So it seems to have worked. My body seems to have responded well to it, right? Because not everybody's that lucky. Not everybody seems to be getting the protection from the vaccine based on how their body responds to it. So far, so good. Keep, watching this space, right? But for me, I'm at a point now where I would like to see a lot more long-term data before I would go in for a booster. Yeah, Carl says worrying all the time wears you down. It does, right? And yet at each point, we're having to make decisions, right? And it's coming up to the point where some people with jobs where they would prefer to remain unvaccinated, they're going to lose their jobs. Maybe if you have kids and if they're going to come down and mandate it for kids, you have to decide, are you going to take your kid out of school? That kind of thing.
With or even without Carl's permission, I suggest changing the word. If we change the worrying into something closer to anxiety, it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. And of course, we we worry about things, and it almost seems as if the less material worries we have, the more we worry about these the last things we do not have control over. And what we want is this instant control, this panacea, a single solution, one size fits all. And then again, that goal is somewhere placed at the end of a tunnel, and there seems to be no correction based on experience. So again, that is what I find that creates more anxiety for me.
Yeah, I mean, the anxiety that's in people and the increasing demand in people to demand instant solutions for the problem, right? They want instant solutions, and politicians are ready to tell people what they want. And they would love to come in and be the savior, the one who can take credit for the solution.
And in this case, okay, we can say not only politicians, but pharma, Pfizer offers this. Yeah, we have the solution. We will provide you with billions of doses, and it'll go away. Amazon says, sure, lock, close the stores. We will supply.
Trump started this with Pfizer, right? I mean, they were the one who were given the contract. Should any of them been given the contract? And then you can get into a weird philosophy of law problem, which is assume that the government doesn't give favoritism to any of them, but thinks about giving them some sort of special immunity from liability. Is that something good? That's a whole different question. We could have, someone like a Eugene Bollock or someone on like that. Actually, I'd love to have Kaczynski. Is that allowed to be said these days? But he would be excellent on something like this. Carl is asking, he wonders how much the efficacy of the vaccine fades. they're just now starting to acknowledge, Carl, as far as I can tell, that it's the Pfizer vaccine. The efficacy wanes relatively quickly, as soon as 3 months after the last dose is given. And it could be because they didn't put enough dosage into the shots. It could also be the hypothesis, again, I have this wonderful friend who does piles of research on this, but the Pfizer spacing between the vaccines is shorter, whereas Moderna, for instance, we were about 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, I think, between ours at least. And apparently that can help too, to space it out a tiny bit. So between dosage differences, there might be other things about the products that are slightly different, and the spacing of the doses between the two doses, that the Moderna has the edge. As far as we know so far, the Moderna is holding up at about 8 months, and it might end up being longer. Again, there are studies underway. Texas is one of the states doing them, where every 3 months I'm going to go in and have this blood draw and see if I still have these antibodies for the vaccine. So people who want to come on here and say, oh, Amy and Benjamin, they're just anti-science, they're anti-vaxxers and everything else. No, I'm sorry. What we are doing is we are two people doing our best to make the best decisions for us in the midst of all of this information that is, it's incomplete, it's in flux all the time. Some of it, we're not even getting accurate data. So the PCR tests, they changed the number of cycles when Biden went in office. What is the reporting like? The VAERS reporting, we're getting evidence that VAERS, the adverse reactions to vaccines database, the national database, that it's vastly underreported. Some people are saying by 2 orders of magnitude, but we at least know anecdotally that there is some, and we can see the motivation as to why it might be underreported.
Or
it's 30 minutes to report one of those.
Or you can point to the weird reporting. Well, it's not reporting really, but the vicious campaign against ivermectin.
Yes, there's
which
that, which
at
makes
worst,
no sense.
Which at worst is an imperfect treatment, but research shows it has a good effect, a positive effect, if applied early in the cycle. So where does all this venom come from? Why this depiction of a Nobel Prize winning drug
that's used all over the world,
has been prescribed hundreds of millions of times.
The antiviral properties of it have been described in peer-reviewed medical literature.
If we want to throw authority around it, it's FDA approved. So that is just bizarre. And really, I think it's a reiteration of a point we made in a prior opinion piece of when under the guise of battling misinformation, what you see is that information is steered in a certain way, is manipulated in a certain way. So what are you supposed to think? What are they disproving? What are they proving? And part of this is really done publicly. If you want to look up the Trusted News Initiative, subscribed to by, I think the BBC was the party that started it, but Facebook is in on it, major newspapers. And so their declared goal is to stimulate.
But you don't even have to go that obscure, right? We don't have to talk about something called the Trusted News Initiative, which hardly ever makes it into the news. All you had to do is watch Jen Psaki, right? She was there on the news, saying that the Biden administration is flagging misinformation for Facebook.
They were just saying it. No, but it's something that is underway. So Facebook takes instructions from the CDC. Sure, I can acknowledge that they have more medical expertise than I do. It doesn't mean that I have to blindly trust whatever they say. And that's the tunnel people are pushing through right now.
So I think we've done a lot to describe the problem. I would refer people to the piece itself in terms of us laying out the intricacies of the problem. Again, we talk about what is going on with the vaccines, the vilification of ivermectin when you have an arguably similar drug coming out from Pfizer. So you can see the cronyism there. You can see the sort of dire situation that United States is in particular in this pandemic as coming from prior cronyism, again, in big agriculture and the government mandating, or not mandating, but publishing dietary guidelines that were bad advice. In effect, there is bad advice out there. And if the government is behind giving advice, even if supposedly they think it's the best advice at the time, which I doubt, again, I think, sugar had a lot to do with it at the time. They were heavily influenced by the sugar lobby. But, nonetheless, all of us as individuals have to look at all this information that's given to us, consider the source, consider any of the motivations behind the source, look for also just logical consistency in what they're saying. And as we said, with respect to ivermectin, remember the right to try. Everybody in the sort of libertarian or objectivist circles were very excited about a right to try. And some of them who were not pro-Trump, like we are anti-Trump, I don't know, never Trumpers. We're not voting for Trump, okay? Some things he does is okay, but no, we never voted for Trump. We're never Trump supporters, always critics of stuff he did wrong. Even those people were surprised. They thought, oh, this is great that Trump allowed right to try through. Isn't that a good thing that he did, right? And then suddenly, when it comes to ivermectin, not a peep. Nobody's saying anything about right to try. There is at least plenty of advice or information out there to support a right to try ivermectin. And so for people to be engaged in a campaign to discredit ivermectin so vehemently. There was this headline of an article that called it a bogus drug.
Yeah, well, that's,
it is
the horse dewormer.
Well, horse dewormer was the first,
better, right?
but everybody had a great time with the horse dewormer. Horses eat carrots, they drink water. You don't want any of those things, right? But COVID kills the flu, they're saying in there. Sorry, I got distracted. But, the horse dewormer one didn't work. So it's like global warming. They switched to climate change. Now it's from horse dewormer to just bogus drug. It could just be them getting more bold, right? That they are not going to just smear it as a horse dewormer. They're going to say it's a bogus drug across the board. But it's ridiculous. I feel like, and you can go back and look at all the history of my videos on YouTube, such as they are. I haven't been doing that much over the last year and a half or so. I've been busy with the job and everything. But any of the positions that I've taken throughout are my best take on all the available evidence that I had at the time. So for example, I remember, right? So I, at the very beginning said, okay, given decades of involvement in healthcare by government, and the fact that the hospitals are going to be way overrun and we don't really know what the virus is that we're dealing with yet, and all these things, I can see 15 days to flatten the curve. And I personally was saying, yeah, sure, I'd stay home for a couple of weeks just as a personal matter to, be kind to people who might be more vulnerable to a virus that we don't know very much about. And I remember people arguing against me and saying, oh, you're so wrong, you wouldn't. And then now when I am writing pieces against the mandate of a mandate of this vaccine, now that we know so much about this virus, now that we know that kids have very little, if anything, to fear from this virus, and everybody is pushing the vaccine as the savior. Some of the same people, and I'm telling you, at every single point, I'm just doing my best to balance. I told Desmet last week, I'm one of the people who's had a bit of anxiety, who has experienced for myself this narrowing of horizons that we're all supposed to accept in this era because of, the boogeyman of the virus and everything else. I've had my own stuff, and I'm just out there trying to look at all this as objectively as possible and, tell it as I see it. And if you can, at the very beginning of this pandemic, say no lockdowns at all, even then when there was so much uncertainty, and it really did seem, and we were seeing in a lot of cases, Italy, whoa, it was terrible. The hospitals being overrun and healthcare rationed and everything else. And you want to say, okay, let's have this temporary measure. And then now say, I'm not going to speak out against mandates.
That's also looking back, what is really demonstrates the irrational path that has been followed, because what were probably two of the most important IDs initially was one, to protect as much as possible the most vulnerable. This is, of course, what has not effectively been done, because what has happened with the nursing homes shows, everything but a concern for the most vulnerable. And even now, the vaccine being insisted on as a panacea shows to be least convincing, again, for the most vulnerable, because people with a depressed a challenged immune system, and it's really pretty logical, they have least benefits from vaccination. So the whole reasoning of saying, yeah, we must protect them indirectly by vaccinating everybody else, that has been proven false, because there are the breakthrough cases.
Well, and so here's, someone was talking about this fear that some people have, and it's not based on nothing, right? What I'm about to say is not arbitrary. There is a concern that in vaccinating everybody with this vaccine, which allows infection, transmission, spread to everybody, that you could be at risk for getting the virus mutated into a super virus that's going to be more deadly for other people. If that's, and what is this based on, right? It's not arbitrary.
On a chicken study.
Yeah, it's based on the chicken vaccine studies, right? Where this happened in chickens, that if you vaccinate them, that you create this strain, this super strain, and that you can't have any unvaccinated chickens after that because they'll die, because there's that concern. Now, if it's true that people with problems with their immune system are not responding and building up the antibodies to this virus,
which is the definition of a challenged immune system.
Challenged immune system is not going to respond to the vaccine and not actually get protection for themselves. Then it could be by those of us who are healthier and getting ourselves vaccinated, and perhaps potentially helping with the emergence of strains that are either more transmissible or more deadly, or both, that we are doing the opposite of protecting the most vulnerable. And certainly we might be doing the opposite of protecting the people who choose to be unvaccinated, right? And so this is when we go back, and I said, I was a little bit happy to see that I responded to Moderna. It's an upvote for how my immune system is doing in that way, right? So we can be happy. But there are people who are apparently not as fortunate, that their immune systems are not responding to the vaccine the way we would.
A lot of it is symbolic. You can look at the masks as well. So anything short of a surgical mask really hardly does anything.
This is how I've evolved through the pandemic too, right? At the beginning, I was thinking, yeah, I'll wear the mask. And I was going to wear the mask because I knew a lot of people were scared. And even though I didn't think it was going to do anything based on my understanding of the science,
Yeah,
I
well,
was willing
the
to
science
do it.
was not
Not
decided.
outside. I wasn't willing to do it
Yeah.
outside, but in a store or whatever. And now
But,
we're in
yeah.
Texas where, they really can't do anything if you don't wear a mask. I'm making a point not to wear a mask right now, just to help to educate people, not because I want to be mean to them. I don't want to scare them or anything else. And I do stay away from people who themselves have, some big heavy mask on and stuff, and I'm polite to them and everything else, but I'm going in and I'm being as polite as possible, but I'm not wearing a mask. And I'm doing it in part because it is time that, and we should really get into sort of, what are the solutions, right? And as I said, Rob Wolf is going to have some of his own, but we have some indications that maybe there is the flattening of the CronyCare curve, at least with respect to this pandemic. That would be nice. But what can you do? One of the things you can do, as Professor Desmet talked about last week, is speak out. And one of the ways of speaking out is just symbolically, right? To go in and politely not wear a mask. And, you're still going to be courteous to people and not abrasive about it. I guess if they came up and they said, you really have to wear a mask in our store, then I would, but nobody has ever done it.
Yeah, but
And
you have to wonder if the suggestion of improving safety, when in fact you're not doing that at all, is helpful. If
no,
if the
right, because
cloth
that could
mask
even be
doesn't-
harmful. That could be
doesn't
harmful,
catch
yes.
any of the aerosols. Is it all about the theater? And part of it seems to be theatrical.
So Randall is asking, any research on people who have had COVID getting vaccinated? So as I understand it, if you have been vaccinated and your body has responded, decently to the vaccine, and you've built some immunity, then you are likely to get a less severe case of COVID. So it is having that effect for those people who have been vaccinated and whose immune systems have responded. Again, this is the best guess on the available evidence that I've seen. But there are exceptions. There are some people who, either haven't responded well, or maybe that they have certain conditions such that the virus acts in a way in their body that, couldn't be. There's just so much unknown. And again, it's the sheer volume of stuff that is unknown, both about the safety long-term of the vaccines, about the disease itself, that the idea of mandating one particular solution and way of dealing with this, one that can have long-term detrimental effects on the person that you're injecting, right? It's just, there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse.
No, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because someone's physical integrity, that's an important principle. So it doesn't matter why somebody doesn't want to be vaccinated. That choice should be there. And again, I think the most important thing is to keep asking questions, because otherwise, if once this this pandemic is reasonably over, though you really do wonder how long certain parties will want to extend it. There will be another situation, and there will be another crisis, and of course, and this is something that we should never forget when we talk about how totalitarianism comes about. It's always with the best intentions. People are worried about something that they see as life-threatening, and they are infused with this feeling. And somebody is going to tell them, we have everything under control. And that's nonsense, because if there's any conclusion you can draw from comparing either different US states or different countries and the approach they they've adopted in dealing with with a tiny little virus is that there has been no control.
It doesn't matter which approach
and
they have adopted. It
so
seems,
this is not to be cynical or anything. No, it's just recognizing the facts for what they are,
Yeah.
and asking whether the type of measures and the level of sawing at fundamental rights we have. Gee, I mean, being locked down, that's pretty
what
drastic.
what they're doing in Melbourne
is that
right
at
now is
all
terrible.
proportional to the actual risk?
No, no, I
And
don't think so.
and well, again, how much healthier will locking down your population? How much healthier will that make them? Seriously.
Yeah. So in terms of, kind of a projection of, are we starting to flatten the CronyCare curve when it comes to this particular crisis? What can we do to flatten it? We're going to spend the last few minutes talking more about those sorts of things. I just want to reiterate, and I'm going to put these two articles on my blog at don'tletitgo.com for people who want to see them. One that gave me a little bit of hope this week was the news out of Norway. Norway has reclassified COVID as nothing more dangerous than the ordinary flu. And they did this based on a number of factors, which included, of course, the percentage of the population that was vaccinated. But they have looked at the fatality, the hospital numbers of late, the percent of the population that's vaccinated, and they have made the decision that for their country, that they are going to classify it now as no more dangerous to the system that counts. And they are really focusing on overloading the hospital system as the standard, which is the one that Amish Adalja used to talk about all the time as the standard. And I always thought he was so right to focus on that, right? Because that is the one place where he got, they got me at the beginning, right? Which was, I'm very sympathetic to not have the hospitals overrun, to not burden our healthcare workers. Now, what are they doing to those healthcare workers they don't want to burden? They're forcing them to take a vaccine they don't want, right? So there's that too. But in any event, Norway has decided based on this that they can go ahead and ease up on all the restrictions. They're done, which is a beautiful thing. In Australia, of course, they're locking down. In the UK, they've been opening up. So for example, I follow musicians from Australia, and whereas Hayley Mary is staying in lockdown, her partner Johnny Took, who's with the DMAs, traveled to the UK to do a whole bunch of shows. Duran Duran has been doing shows in packed houses in the UK and Birmingham in the last week or two. Just people like sardines and everything. People going on with normal life in some areas of the world. Now, one person was quick to suggest, with respect to Norway and comparing Norway to United States, that we are in the United States less healthy generally metabolically. And so that for us, this virus could kick our butts more than it does in Norway. And this is something we have to think about, but it's something that nobody wants to discuss. The Rob Wolfs of the world, they discuss it and they discuss it expertly and they tell you what to do about it. But our government doesn't do that. And what happens here? And again, this is in the piece that we wrote. This is the perfect example of taking all this decades-long government involvement in steering the dietary choices of Americans in the wrong direction and just bring it right into the pandemic era. If you remember early on when the vaccine was out there, Krispy Kreme, among others, were offering free donuts if you went and got vaccinated. The donut is about the least nutritionally dense food that there is in the world, and it's full of things that are bad for you. And that's what they're going to give you if you get a vaccine that you might not have needed if you hadn't eaten so many donuts in your life, right? So that's us versus Norway. You had something on that, and then we'll go on to another piece that I think is potentially
No, but
auspicious.
there's another piece in the pipeline that also addresses this. And, again, I don't want to be cynical, but you can also wonder whether this isn't part of a pattern of looking at health the way, I don't know, you would look at getting your car tuned up regularly, but in a mechanical way. So we can roll from miracle pill to miracle pill. And this is in the wake of the opioid crisis. And the real human way of approaching it would be to look at your health as a whole and as
Right.
part of a set of habits.
Which is what doctors do. The doctors whose advice are being ignored.
Good
right
doctors
now,
do,
right?
yeah, because you don't want to reach the stage where you prescribe medication that necessarily has collateral effects. Otherwise, it would be a placebo, right?
Right.
Or I guess even a placebo could get you worried and produce collateral effects. Anyway.
Yeah. So other something else auspicious is, as tepid as it was, that New York Times article that I saw this week talking about the fact that, oh yeah, Moderna is somewhat better than Pfizer. At least we have to admit that, said New York Times. And once that information starts coming out, that the favored winner picked by big government, Pfizer, is maybe not the best product. And it shouldn't have so much government firepower behind it. And I don't mean real firepower, of course. I hope not, right? That picture in Australia was pretty ominous, but we're talking dollars at this point. All of the tremendous subsidy to Pfizer of guaranteeing that you're going to buy hundreds of thousands of doses and bring them around the world.
So that, of course, was a discussion that never really started. Not anywhere that I could see. The contract, I believe Albania had signed with Pfizer that was leaked. And then you have to wonder, and you have to assume that it's at least part of it are standard clauses. And it's one thing for an individual.
But Trump was really good at negotiating, right? So the US contract must be great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but so let me return to the psychological perspective, both of Professor De Smet's and my own. The politician will, of course, imagine himself being the heroic negotiator and all that. And people want to believe that, because if they're told that they should be afraid, and maybe if they're a bit less afraid, just wait until we keep you locked down and you can work behind the screen all the time, and you can't do this, you can't do that, you cannot socialize, etc. Well, let's see how you'll feel after a couple of months. Right, but so people will want to believe that narrative. They have to be delivered. They have to be freed from something that, of course, is really a part of nature, of dealing with germs and this kind of thing. And so you'd have to wonder why, why as a society we're so vulnerable to it.
Right. No, and and what we can do about that as well. Randall's saying here in the chat about nurses not wanting the vaccination. They have a rejection of trust in their profession. Yeah. Why a nurse when no one has belief in medicine? Nurses are mandated to get multiple vaccines pre-COVID. Now, the vaccines that nurses have been mandated to get have had decades long track record. Right. So this is a new vaccine that people have legitimate concerns about. So for example, nurses, if we talk about the fact, it's sexist to say it or whatever, but most of the profession is female. And there are legitimate
Well,
concerns. There are studies being done about the effects of the vaccine on women's menstrual cycles and ability to carry fetuses to term. And there should be, I think, a lot more data about this over a long period of time of women having successful pregnancies, no problems, cycles being normal for a long time before any woman of childbearing age is forced to take this vaccine. And to be so cavalier about it, I don't, again, I find a lot of this inexcusable.
Well,
So
the
there are
same goes
government
for
funded studies
this-
right now
this-
being conducted on the response of women's menstrual cycles about this. Go read it at Cheryl Atkinson. I don't think Facebook allows this. This is the thing, you guys, if you're not on Parler, come to Parler, check out the news that's on the Discover page, at least just root around there a bit, because you will see stories and you have to go in and decide for yourself. I can't tell you everything that's on there is true or false. That's not what Parler does. Parler doesn't fact check for you. You have to think for yourself, but you will hear from devoted journalists like Cheryl Atkinson, devoted journalists like John Solomon, these people, and of course, we have Stossel, John Stossel, active on Parler. These are people with journalistic integrity, and of course, now we've got Glenn Greenwald, who's doing quite a bit. Stuff is coming out through The Intercept all the time. You need to get off Facebook and Twitter and stop being exposed to only what they would permit, only what the government hasn't told them to remove this week, right? It's getting that bad. And that was why we were saying in the piece that it's scarier right now. It is scarier right now because of these big tech platforms joining this partnership. And, even if lockdowns aren't still in effect in the place where you are, there are habits that you have formed during the lockdowns that probably have increased your reliance on these big tech platforms and have made you sort of glued in and addicted to these. With they dopamine, we get dopamine hits from this or something.
Yep.
Okay, glued to these devices more. Try to, if you're going to be on these devices, at least diversify the sources that you're getting. And as I said, yeah, some of it's going to be wrong and you have to dig through. And as I said, I have a friend, she's got a healthy dose of skepticism. And at the same time, she will give the vaccines and everything else they're due after digging and looking at the research. That's there's no option.
Well,
we don't have the option to
no.
outsource our thinking to others.
So how is it possible that in such short a time frame, we've gone from at least expressly embracing debate as a core characteristic of the open society and of the way we live in the West, to the opposite, really. It's this
vilifying the unvaccinated, people who are just making decisions about their own health.
Wanting to suggest that science means that there is only that there you have these standard chunks of truth, and don't worry, we'll get it to you. And the important thing is not to question, because questioning will endanger people, and that's again, I find that very scary. I really hope that people who had the presence of mind of seeing that process occur when it came to the climate emergency,
which is going to come back again very soon.
Which is going to come back, and I really hope that those people who did have the healthy skepticism there, that they might find the same attitude towards this non-debate that we're witnessing now. This slavish following of this vague beacon, which is only based on thou shalt have fear. Of what? It's illness and death is definitely something we have to deal with in life, right? It's not something we resolve or eliminate by if we all say the same thing. This is insane.
No, exactly. I've got one off-topic question from Mark. Thank you for the super chat there, Mark. And yes, I'll go ahead and discuss this briefly. What does the new Texas abortion law say about the Republican stance on medical autonomy? Doesn't it show that neither side can be trusted to protect rights? And I would say yes, right? Mm-hmm. And abortion is a whole controversial show topic that maybe we'll try to take up or not, but it's you just want only me to take the hit, right? It's a horrible topic.
Throw you under the bus.
I was on Dinesh D'Souza's show in the last couple of weeks or so, and I was having a great conversation with him. And of course, it was after this, Texas abortion law had been passed and signed. And he was talking about it a lot on Parler and everything. And I was saying, God, I hope he doesn't. And the topic at hand was not supposed to go there at all. And yet he drew an analogy that went over to the abortion law. So of course I had to say something, because I'm not just going to sit there and pretend I agree with him about abortion. So I did the best that I could, trying to be polite in a short period of time, but express my disagreement. And then I talked with him a little bit more after the show as well. And it turned out, he's friendly with me, so he's fine. He truly walks the talk. There are conservatives out there who really seem happy to be in an environment that respects freedom of expression, the entire First Amendment, and that they mean what they say. My boss George Farmer married to Candace Owen. They're conservative, politically is what you would say, although he's been calling our platform libertarian, right? And it really is. It's a platform where all ideas can be expressed. We don't fact check, just come there and, go ahead. We have a bunch of leftists who are coming on now, and they will try and troll you and stuff. But anyway, so long story short, yeah. I agree with you. And when the very analogy that Dinesh was trying to make did end up, I think, also proving that the conservatives can be hypocritical about this as well, right? Mm-hmm. He was trying to say, aren't the leftists, hypocritical about this?
Your body is yours as long as you use it the way we would like you to.
Yeah, and that's how both sides are tending to be right now, right? So we disagree with both. Just to give the snippet, I got to give a snippet, because people are going to say, oh my God, she's in favor of abortion. Like she's one of those people that I forget which female politician it was who talked about, oh yeah, women, they go and they get lattes and abortions at some strip mall or something. People need to stop talking about abortion this way. I could not imagine that any rational person would want to put herself, and I'm not going to say person, woman, right? They always talk about pregnant people. That's what you're supposed to say these days. This is so ridiculous. Only women can get pregnant. I'm sorry. But a woman would not want to put herself in a place where she had to use surgery as birth control. What rational woman would want to do that? I would think a woman who is at all rational is going to do whatever she can to avoid being put in that situation. But there are women who are raped. There are women, and I actually know a woman who was using birth control properly and nonetheless got pregnant at a point where she had had a bunch of kids already. And you could have understood if she had maybe wanted to not want to have another because she'd had plenty already. There's a number of situations that happen, not to mention all sorts of birth defects that you can find out about quite early in a pregnancy that would make you be in that situation. Okay, so avoid it. And then the question is, when we talk about it from the standpoint of politics, when does politics have something to say about abortion anyway? Right. So I was just talking about from a moral standpoint. Let's talk about it differently. From a political standpoint, when should government have a say in this? it's not when a life process begins, in my view, right? There are life-like processes that begin in the body very early, but it's at a point where you have an individual with rights. And we could start talking about whether a fetus is an individual with rights at the point of viability, where it can exist outside the womb. This will end up becoming a line that has to be drawn in the law somewhere, and it's a question for philosophy of law. But the principle is that individuals have rights, and that insofar as you're not dealing with an individual, you shouldn't be talking about rights, and there's not a role of government at that point. That's the way I think about abortion. In terms of a moral situation, anybody who actually treated abortion like these politicians do in their straw man arguments and say, oh yeah, women just, they go get lattes and abortions.
Yeah, well,
no.
I think the very point, the fact that neither party can be trusted to respect your bodily integrity is a sign that is really essential for people to speak up, to speak out. I'm vaccinated, but I defend anybody's right to choose not to be vaccinated.
Right.
And if
fact,
this is not a clear concept to people, and why I mean the much abused fake Voltaire speech of not agreeing with somebody but defending their right to say so. Of course, this goes for life choices as well. And if you may have the flavor of the day, as in, I'm in favor of vaccination. Everybody should. Maybe yours may be the flavor of the day, but next week, what's going to happen? Are they going to?
What if it is true about the chicken virus vaccine analogy? And if everybody who has participated in the vaccination experiment has helped to create a virus that is more transmissible or more lethal, and then the tables turn and suddenly all the people who chose the vaccine are going to get
right.
blamed.
Yeah. Then
why can't we all just be in a place where we know that everybody's dealing with tremendous uncertainty? And I'll say one more thing about my choice to take the vaccination. One of the things that made me more comfortable getting the vaccine was that Gregory Abbott, the governor of Texas, every single time talked about the fact that the vaccination in Texas is a purely voluntary thing. He says it's always been voluntary, it always will be voluntary. Yes, Texas did help make it available, and they had an actually quite efficient system for distributing the vaccines. So, go Texas in that way, but it was completely voluntary. And, if they really want compliance from people, you make it voluntary, right? And I don't see how they think that they're going to achieve anything positive by forcing something like this on people when they have understandably qualms about it. It's hard enough when you have qualms about it. If somebody's forcing it on you, this is when you start getting this t-shirt, right? I ordered this t-shirt from JP Sears after Biden's speech, and I just got it, so I'm showing it off. I did want to, we're probably way over time, and I do want to just kind of say one more thing as far as the direction that we're going. And last week really was a beautiful find in Professor Desmet, because he provided that final nudge, a good nudge in a good way for me to want to start a show again. And I didn't even realize at that time how much it would sort of coincide exactly with the theme and the purpose and the direction of the show. But he talked about the fact that the 30%, there's about 30% or so in a population. And we could talk about, in future shows, whether that is still true today, but historically there's been 30% who are willing to speak out against totalitarianism. And he made a very interesting observation too, which is that the 30% are people who come from a wide variety of viewpoints, political parties, religious, non-religious, all sorts of points of view and life experiences and locations, etc. And so that if you really do want to resist totalitarianism and you want to make the best use of the 30% who are willing to speak out, and maybe you want to engage in some sort of coordinated effort with those people, it might be good to, as much as you can, focus on common ground with them. And so I was exploring with him a couple ideas of, last week, sort of the classical liberal idea of defending everybody's right to live his or her own life according to her own best judgment, so long as he doesn't, violate the rights of other people. The just core classical liberal ideas, of course, freedom of expression being a top value and mandate that we respect that. And also the issue of sort of helping to, and I don't know how you do this, right? I'm just putting it out there, how you can encourage people to focus their lives around productive or other positive activities that can address and maybe just minimize or take the focus away from any free-floating anxiety that exists in people. And it could be part of our nature because now we don't have the hardship in meeting our daily life needs for food, clothing, and shelter the way that we used to, right?
Yeah, okay, but
so could we provide a positive outlet for that? So, speaking out the truth as much as you can, trying to enable and facilitate and inspire, provide outlets for the 30% who want to speak out, and also maybe trying to look towards positive ways to channel everybody's focus in the future, so it doesn't have to be, oh, there's free floating anxiety and it's going to be attached to, the coronavirus, solving that problem or solving the climate problem, or, in this era, of course, we're trying to say, let's worry about totalitarianism, creeping totalitarianism as the short-term thing. Yeah, you should be more concerned about that than you should be about the climate or about the virus. But long-term, we don't want people just being motivated by fear or anxiety that is targeted on a something that shouldn't be a life focus. A life should be living a joyous life here on earth. We shouldn't be, predominantly, focusing on these other things. We shouldn't be distracted by them. And that would be the direction that I want to go with this show. Of course, calling the shots as we see them, trying to wake people up to the extent that we can. When in my work at Parler, I'm providing a platform for people who want to spread information, to question the narrative that they're being fed, etc. We don't fact check there. Again, I also don't guarantee the truth of everything on the platform, and don't say that, I do. Everybody's got to go out there and use their own best judgment. So that's, the direction that I want to go with this show, and really return to an individualist, independent sense of life focus. And how do we recover that? How do we further that in this era? So, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you wanted to say one more thing.
No, my next blog post is going to be about this as well. But I think it's a weakness in our hardware that we're not prepared for the luxury of time, basically. So we start worrying about things, and a principle that used to be good for our survival becomes a vehicle of it's a sort of a dependency as well, right? There has to be something to worry about, but so I think I had this alliteration in my mind while you were speaking. the model and the political model, the way I would pronounce it is capitalism with care. That is that you support freedom because it's good for people and because people can be themselves and not because of some statistical model. So,
yeah, I mean, I think Desmet was right that anybody who is speaking about these issues from I'm putting words in his mouth here, but a first-handed perspective and really just trying to grapple and make the best decision for themselves and for their loved ones, and is discussing this openly out there without fear. Even if you disagree with those people, you can engage with them and you can learn from them. And
yeah, well, I think it all starts with being simple, saying it can be really frustrating, but I'm just offering a question, and then in the wrong situation, they'll hurl the weirdest accusations at you. But of course, asking questions is where it all starts. And if somebody can't handle a question, you'd have to wonder whether they're not really demonstrating the truth of Desmet's idea that it becomes so important to uphold the narrative, because there are all these free-floating anxieties that one has to confront as soon as the focal point is given up. So yeah, no, it's been a very very instructive discussion with him. And for anybody who's still listening at this point, please watch the interview with Professor Desmet.
yeah, that's one thing that anybody who's listening here can do, is share that discussion with Desmet, because I think the whole thing is worth people listening to. And I think I did a decent job of eliciting the story and the points in a good order that I think will be easy for people to take in as well. That's something that I really tried to do there, because I was so taken by his ideas. So yes, going forward, there's going to be, speaking out substantively on the issues. As I said, I do hope to get Rob Wolf on here to talk about more concretely what we can do to flatten the CronyCare curve, the public-private partnership, the fascism that's existed in agriculture and pharma and other places having to do with your health. And when we get back to this, which we're starting to, and a lot of people are already pointing it out too. If you're on Parler, you're already seeing people talk about the fact that there is the same hysteria with respect to climate that there is about COVID. So it's already turning to that. We'll probably have Willie soon on here. I only thought of that while we were just sitting here, but of course we should have him on, because he is very knowledgeable about all things climate related. And so we will help be voices for debunking any climate panic, any catastrophic climate change predictions that they're going to try to use as excuses to violate our rights. And yeah, as I said, again, we'll keep talking about issues related to the American sense of life, as Rand called it. I call it the individualist sense of life. The essay, Don't Let It Go, if you have not read it yet for some reason, it's in the book Philosophy Who Needs It. She wrote it in 1971. So you have to sort of put it in context of today. But she raised this real issue. There are these attitudes and ideas that have protected the United States or protected anywhere in the world from becoming totalitarian. And what can we do to foster those in ourselves and in other people? That's been a continuing theme of the show, and it will be going into the future. So everybody, thank you for being here today. We will get back next week. And I'm going to settle on this time if I can. So it'd be noon Eastern time. I don't know that I always want to go this long. I'd rather cut it off right in an hour. We'll see what we can do. But I will talk to you then. And thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Oh, you're saying goodbye already? Okay, here. I have to find the end button. It's been too long. I'm just out of the habit. Bye, everybody. Ah, don't.